and down, counting out, smiling through the taste of blood in my own mouth. I got bruises and broken bones, but they don't know I ain't in this ring alone. I'm a fighter, no one can say that I'm a running hider. I was born to be a do-or-dyer, a make-it-righter. Don't throw that towel just yet, don't cash in that last bet, 'cause I hit harder when I'm tired. I'm a fighter. I get back up, that's what I do. I didn't soldier on this far just to lose. So take your shot, is that all you got? I'm a fighter, no one can say that I'm a running hider. I was born to be a do-or-dyer, a make-it-righter. Don't throw that towel just yet, don't cash in that last bet, 'cause I hit harder when I'm tired. Yeah, I'm a fighter. Oh, no one can keep me down. They didn't know, but they know now. That I'm a fighter. No one can say that I'm a running hider. Don't cash in that last bet, don't throw that towel just yet. I'm a fighter.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabitha Hassell. Welcome to Tabs on Tap. Isn't that a beautiful song? Donald Trump sharing that. We're episode 148 today. Hard to believe we've made it that far. Crazy enough to think about. But I love that. I saw that Donald Trump post almost brings a little tear to the eye because he is a fighter, isn't he? Doesn't give up. And, there's a lot to be said about that he's been fighting for us for longer than most people know. Actually, Donald Trump, most of you know the story. He wanted to run for president. He talked about it as early as the 70s and the 80s, but in 1999 he announced that he was going to potentially put his name in the ring to become the United States president. He didn't go too far with it. I think it was more he threw the idea out there. Everybody else ran with it, including myself, jumped in the ring with him and, went out there and did what we do back in the year 2000, believe it or not. I went out and handed out Trump for president 2000 buttons, and I was lucky enough to have been able to present one of those buttons to Donald Trump himself, which was such a huge honor, many years ago. But you know what? That doesn't always mean that we agree with every single thing Donald Trump does. And that's perfectly okay. So, people have been messaging me like crazy. Like, I didn't agree with this. I didn't agree with that. I wish things were moving along a little bit quicker. That doesn't mean you're not MAGA or you're not a Donald Trump supporter. We're all going to, we're critical thinkers. We are the party of critical thinkers. It's okay, that you're not blindly following every single thing your government does. So if you're one of those people, don't worry about it. We are all that person at some time, and that makes us the conservative movement that we are, because soon enough Donald Trump won't be our president. Another election will come through, hopefully another great conservative candidate, and then we'll have to jump in line, hopefully behind that person and support that person's values, who hopefully supports our values. So we're not always going to agree with everything. Good morning, Rob and Sherry, Linda, Glesna, Allison. Good morning, Allison. And good morning, Karen. Allison, I'm glad you got your garden watered and weeded, because I sure have not. I probably need to be getting up at 5 a.m. to do that before the show starts instead of doing it sometime later after the show starts and I get a little bit of work done. Col Joe Adams joining us in 1 minute, literally 1 minute. So he'll be coming up. Some of the things I'm going to talk about real quick. I want to talk about the leak, the CNN leak. Is it treasonous? Steve Witkoff, of course, our special envoy to, is it, I don't even remember, is it Israel or I don't even remember who he is. But either way, he's calling it a treasonous leak. Of course, allegedly somebody with our Department of Intelligence leaked this information to CNN, is what we're told. So it's a pretty serious situation about whether or not those nuclear facilities were destroyed and how destroyed exactly were there. Of course, Col Joe Adams, being the expert, one of his many more areas of expertise, will talk to us about satellite imagery and that type of thing, which is good because when I look at it, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Down the road in the show, we're going to talk about what's going on across the United States. You may not even know this because we've been very busy, that across the United States, we have these multi-agency task forces, local law enforcement, all across the country rescuing missing children. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what China's doing with TikTok. When we said, oh, China's stealing our information through TikTok, we're like, well, how are they doing that? Well, now we find out, of course, that they are stealing the information on TikTok. They're creating fake driver licenses for people so that they can go out and vote illegally. So we're going to get to that. Good morning, Kimberly. But first, we're going to be joined by Col Joe Adams, and we're going to bring him out into the room with us. Let's see, Col Joe Adams of the Washington Guard. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very happy to have you here. And so many things I want to talk to you about, Col Adams. And, we'll just jump right into things and we'll kind of go from there. And that is, we have this situation with CNN. We know CNN hates Donald Trump. We know the CNN hates us. They hate America. That's pretty obvious. Now, they're claiming that they have received special information directly from the Department of Intelligence that says that when we dropped those bombs, and I think it was 6 bombs onto the Fordow nuclear complex in Iran, that it barely scratched the surface and it just took out the top layer of the building. Nothing else, that their centrifuges are still intact, their facility is still intact. They're only a couple months away from just getting right back to where they started. And when I look at that satellite imagery, I mean, it looks like I don't know what I'm looking at. It looks like the moon to me. So I want to say welcome, first of all, to the show. And what are your thoughts on this?
CNN.
Yeah, I know it's a joke.
I've been watching some of the CNN stuff, and it reminded me of something, and I couldn't put a finger on like what is about CNN and MSNBC that I see them doing these things about the bombing and everything, and we'll get into that in a minute. And I have to say that I'm now going to refer to CNN as Monty Python 1 and MSNBC as Monty Python 2. I mean, Monty Python couldn't write a better script than these two network clowns. So you want to, okay. So most people out there know that I was an O2 operator with the United States Marine Corps, and I actually went to school and studied. Finished first in my class was the aerial photography interpretation and satellite interpretation. So I see a lot of different things in those photographs. Limited photographs. They have thousands of photographs, thousands, and they have issued to the media these particular photos. Right back in a minute. Come on back.
We'll have you in a minute. We're just having a little bit of a freeze on Col Joe Adams there.
I don't want to skip over this photography. Are you back yet?
Col Adams, just so you know, we can't hear you. You're kind of starting to come in a little bit, but it's like we can't hear any entire words. It's just kind of in and out. I don't know. Let me see here. You're still kind of at a freeze frame.
Now,
I hear you right now.
It's off. It's turned off. Yeah. Okay.
I think
we good?
we're still a little bit of a freeze frame, but I can at least hear you.
Okay. You can copy
It's
Tom.
hard, it's hard for that internet signal to get down in that bunker you're in.
Yeah. Well, if we were down in the bunker,
Yeah,
you
loud
wouldn't
and
get
clear right now.
you wouldn't get a signal. I didn't want to skip over some important part of photo interpretation. So in the photographs is not actually actually happened. I've got a signal saying a lost connection. Signal to go away.
It seems better now.
There, I'm back.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I don't want to skip over this. Important. I worked for about a year and a half in photo interpretation, aerial and satellite. So there's a lot to these photographs that's not shown. First of all, only Superman has X-ray vision and can look down exactly to see what the damage is underneath. The people talk about blowing stuff up. Well, these bombs that they launched at these reactors was blowing things down. So none of the actual damage is readable from the surface. Only hands-on people that get there can determine actually the damage. But believe me, we're in much better shape than what CNN or Monty Python 1 and Monty Python 2 talk about. They don't know what they're talking about. I found out it's interesting that no one has talked about. In fact, I've got a couple of things here that no one's talked about. Remember the aerial shot of the 7 bombers and the support mechanism, the fighter aircraft escort? Did anybody notice that white airplane on the front right of that strike package? Remember the white aircraft?
I'm not sure.
No one's talked about that. And it was also carrying Tomahawk. It carries a variety of ordnance. And there's nothing in the reports, and nobody's noticed that. But that was a fighter aircraft. It's basically a 737, but it carries a heavy ordnance package. I don't see anything in the reports about it being used, but some of that surface damage down there, and I call it surface damage, was the Tomahawk missiles. But whether that white aircraft engaged or not, no one's talking about it, and I don't know. But it's there.
Yeah, I haven't heard. I know we had the submarines. I know we had our bombers, but I haven't heard anything about anything else. But it was a very successful, I think, mission. But the thing is, Colonel Adams, is that to me, I keep thinking, why does it? Quite honestly, why does it really matter? It's upsetting that CNN potentially committed treason, if in fact they did receive special intelligence reports. And they reported on those reports that was classified information that could potentially harm United States assets, then perhaps that is treason. Now, I think we all know that Iran has secret nuclear bases that we did not touch, and that we'll worry about that another time. You can't necessarily attack something that you don't know where it is, or you don't have the best intelligence reports. But at the same time, yes, Iran's going to start their nuclear weapon program again. Did we delay them by months? Did we delay them by years? Donald Trump says several years. Of course, we know they're going to pick right up where they left off at some point down the line. So does it really matter?
No, it doesn't matter. I think I lost signal again. Can you still copy me?
Got you. Yeah, we got you.
Okay, I got a signal here that says connection reconnecting. Anyway, you can still hear me. No, I got new people.
Oh, we lost you again. I don't know what's going on today. Maybe there's like a solar storm.
I don't know. Can you still copy?
Right now, yes. It's kind of in and out.
I was hoping to see a Stratofortress flying in on the perimeter of our big B-52 strategic bomber. But of course, he didn't use that. And Iran better hope they never see that thing coming over the horizon, because they'd be finished.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. But I'll tell you what, we all saw the anger from Donald Trump the other day when he was, talked to by some reporters, and that, of course, they violated the ceasefire. Both Israel and Iran violated the ceasefire. both countries.
Yeah.
Donald Trump not happy.
No, yeah, he dropped the F bomb. That was pretty funny. But you know what he did that? I got news for you. That was intentional. He was sending a signal.
Oh, I'm sure.
Uh-oh. No, that was not an accident. I know how that guy thinks, and I know what I would do. No, that was intentional. He sent a message. He went above and beyond to send a message. He's pissed. So, but he's not. Hey, and nobody's talking about who actually financed this operation. I mean, the Iranian research and everything, with the nuclear. I mean, it was Hillary Clinton that sold our uranium to Iran. She arranged that on purchase
under Rosatom.
Yeah, Obama gave him $1.68 million, $1.68 billion to help finance it. And Joe Biden turned around and gave him $16 billion in frozen assets.
Yes.
So you want to know who financed that operation? The Democrats. They financed it.
No question about it. We all remember when Obama delivered those 2 pallets of cash. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. I know some guys was on that detail. Anyway, so thank you very much, Democrats.
I remember when Hillary Clinton, I had a different show, of course, back then in those days. And I remember talking about it. I actually met the guy who owned Rosatom, his name's Frank Gustra, and he sold Rosatom to Hillary Clinton. And I had an opportunity to talk to him and talk about that situation back when it first took place. And yes, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, did a lot of disservice to this country in many, many ways. It's a little bit, but we can hear you right now. Are you there? Are you with us, Colonel Adams? I can't tell if it's frozen. Yep, I think it's frozen again. I don't know what's going on with the cell phone, this internet signal today.
We're back now.
We can hear you right now. It just keeps freezing.
Yeah, I can't see the comments coming in either. Are we back?
Yep, I hear you.
I got a freeze frame on you. Okay. Hey, there's something that would be. There was a thing brought up very Israel first attacked. There was a group of Mossad spies had been implanted in Tehran, and supposedly they got caught. And I haven't heard back. I was going to call my contact with Mossad.
I can tell you what happened to them. They've been hung. Well, they were executed yesterday.
Were they all executed?
They were all executed yesterday. Yeah, Iran executed them. They caught several people who were, they said, working with Israel within Iran. I believe it was 7 in total that they arrested, and they hung them yesterday. They were executed. Iran arrested over about almost 800 people that they thought had Israeli ties. All of those people facing execution in the coming days and weeks. It's a really, serious situation taking place. And Colonel Adams, I don't know that we can act fast enough to save any of these people.
Probably not. I'm going to comment on those Mossad spies. First of all, I've worked with Mossad. I know a lot of people in Mossad. That was a volunteer operation. Mossad asked people, there's a good chance and probably you're not coming back. So God bless those brave men. I've been a part of those operations where they said, there's a good chance you're not coming back. And of course, I always said, well, if that's me, some Mossad agents to get the job done, expected to come back. Amen.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And, and we're going to see these executions continue.
Yeah, they're good. What's the latest scoop out of the system? What's the latest scoop on the Nobel for? Now, that was first announced about him getting the laureate. Is that just a Hussein Obama got a prize?
Well, Colonel Adams, you're frozen right now. I can only hear little pieces of the words you're saying, but I have a good idea. I can I can only hear like every other part of every word you're saying. So I think what you're asking is about Donald Trump and where it stands with the Nobel Peace Prize. Last I heard today, Israel has also jumped into that boat and said they would like Donald Trump, of course, to win that Nobel Peace Prize. We all know, though, the problem is the folks who run the show, who hand out that Nobel Peace Prize, they don't like Donald Trump. We've lost Colonel Adams. Hope he's going to come back in here in just a second. And, the folks who run the Nobel Peace Prize program, they don't like Donald Trump. Remember, they give their Nobel Peace Prizes to the most crazy liberal people on the planet, not to people like Donald Trump. We're going to bring Colonel Adams back in. And sorry for all the internet stuff. I don't know what to do to work that out. I think it's Colonel Adams is in a very remote location out there in Washington, Missouri, kind of a fortified area. So I think that kind of interferes with his internet signal. Let's bring him in here again. There you are. We see you. Now we hear you. So far, so good. Okay. And I apologize.
I want to comment. I just want to comment on the Nobel Peace Prize that even the mention of that, had to have triggered the Democrat suicide hotline. I bet those numbers lit up because these guys are going to start slashing their wrists. I do find it really Monty Python, the fact that the
we are
try to get
again.
I was talking after the ceasefire was announced, they for an impeachment vote. I mean, how ridiculous! These guys are crazy. You got it.
Kind of. We're just kind of every other word, Colonel Adams, and I know you said something about Democrats. I'm thinking what you're talking about is Democrats being crazy, trying to impeach Trump. Well, we knew going into this situation that they were going to do every single thing they could to impeach Trump, whether they have to make up things or whether it's truthful. And of course, they're going to continue to make up lies. There is going to be no impeachment. That is not going to happen. Donald Trump did, in fact, warn Hakeem Jeffries and all the other Chuck Schumer. They all claim he didn't tell them what he was going to do, but he absolutely did. And we now can prove that.
Yeah, but that report, that news article came out with CNN about it was superficial damage, and it was reported in the New York Times, superficial damage. That reporter who told them that, he's the same reporter that printed a story about the Hunter laptop fallacy, that it wasn't real. That's the same guy.
Well, of course. Well, coming from the New York Times, coming from CNN or MSNBC, any of these networks, of course. Ridiculous. They're not going to tell us the truth.
I mean, he's already been ridiculous. What happened to his credibility? He's already been discredited for lying and making things up. He works for the Dems, and they publish his information. It's terrible. You know what I said about the Democrats when they heard about the possible peace prize? They have
I think the government
suicide
just want you to talk about it.
Fine, lit up. No, they don't. Not at all. We got a bad connection.
Every time you talk about the Peace Prize, you blank out.
Yeah, well, the Peace Prize. Did you get the Democratic suicide hotline, which they have now?
Yes.
So I'm sure the hotline lit up. Hey, you're having some technical troubles. It's messing with your show. Let's back off, and I'll talk to you next week. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Colonel Adams. We'll be talking to you soon. Thank you, with the Washington Guard, joining us today. And yeah, I apologize, guys. I don't know what's going on. I think it's because, like I said, Colonel Adams, he's in a fortified bunker out there in Washington, Missouri, with the Washington Guard, and they don't, it's a rural area. They probably just don't have the best internet signal. It's not their fault. We will continue working with Colonel Adams to get that sorted out. I'm going to give him some suggestions after the show's over today, see if we can get it straightened out for next week. But either way, happy to have Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard next Wednesday when Colonel Joe Adams joins us. Hopefully we'll have a little bit better signal for him there and can hear what because he's got some valuable information. We just can't hear it, and it's probably somebody sitting behind the thing on Facebook. Report, report, report every time Colonel Joe Adams talks. So we will get that worked out and sorted out. But thank you again for joining us. And yes, Linda says I don't think Facebook approves of the conversation. And Rob says, can we get a GoFundMe going to get a better internet connection for the Colonel? And Rob, definitely not funds is the issue. But I think again that Colonel Joe Adams, he's out there in Washington, Missouri. He's in a rural area. He's got quite the compound going on there, and I'm assuming that that's the issue. Scott, let's see here. Talking about Starlink. I have Starlink here, but I don't use it. What's interesting about the show here is that my show has its own internet connection. I use a T-Mobile hotspot, situation. It's like $50 a month. I hook it up. The only thing that runs on my T-Mobile hotspot is this show. Nothing else. I don't use it for anything else. And so it's very, dedicated to what we're doing here. And so that's something maybe we can talk about, trying also. But we'll get it worked out one way or the other. Very happy to have Colonel Joe Adams joining us today again with the Washington Guard. They have musters on Saturday. They always welcome guests. You can reach out to thewashingtonguard.com if you would like to come out as a guest and join Colonel Joe Adams and his crew, see what they have set up and all of that. I was thinking about some of the things Colonel Adam was saying, and of course, Donald Trump being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for at least, I think, 4 or 5 different countries have nominated him. But the folks who run the Nobel Peace Prize program, they give it to people like Obama. Seriously. And it's very liberal program. I don't see them ever giving it to Donald Trump, no matter who nominates him. I don't see it happening. Israel being the latest country, Netanyahu jumping in and says, yes, Donald Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize for working out this ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Now, speaking of the ceasefire, I think as soon as Donald Trump announced there was a ceasefire, then of course, here we go, more violation of the ceasefire, Israel violating the ceasefire first, from what I understand. Oh, no, I take that back. Iran fired a rocket. It was a retaliatory rocket or missile into Israel. They didn't try to hit anything. They just put it into an empty field, kind of just there on the outskirts of the area, just as a show of force. And then, of course, Israel launching similar show of force back into Iran, not really hurting anything, just hitting a field. So it was kind of a back and forth, tit for tat, like this whole situation has been all along. Donald Trump, of course, beyond upset about Israel unloading, he said, everything they had on Iran just before the ceasefire was called. And it's going to be a tough situation. I don't know about you guys. I don't see us ever having peace in the Middle East. I don't see it ever happening. I know it's biblical. I don't see it happening. I think any type of ceasefire is going to be temporary. I didn't post it, but almost as soon as Donald Trump announced ceasefire, I thought, I know he worked really hard for that ceasefire, and I'm not going to throw in any negative comments. But the first thing I thought was, how long is it going to take for someone to violate it? Because look at all the ceasefires that take place over between Ukraine and Russia. They'll call a truce, a ceasefire, then 2 minutes later, they're shooting at each other again. Because, when it comes to religious ideology, it is impossible to call a truce because we have the Islamic Republic, who absolutely will not stand for Israel. They will never, never feel that Israel should exist. So, of course, they're going to continue their religious ideology against Israel. We have Hamas and some of the people who support Hamas. It's the same situation. It comes back to religious ideology. And it's almost an unstoppable force. And I'm sure I don't recall the guy's name. I'm sure you guys saw that in New York State, we had very, very conservative, socialist Muslim man who just beat Cuomo. And, I'm not overly surprised by that. Things are going to get pretty crazy in New York. Again, no big surprise there. I saw a photo this morning of a person in a burqa replacing the Statue of Liberty. We see it over in the UK. Look at over in the UK. If you look at every mayor of every, major town across the United Kingdom, they are all very conservative Muslims. And I'm not talking out badly about Muslim. I know a lot of people of the Muslim faith who are very good people. They're here for the same reasons we are. Many of them are conservatives and Donald Trump supporters, and they have the same concerns we do. And the reason why is because I've met so many Muslims who have told me that they attend their mosque and then all of a sudden one seed is planted for radicalism, just one. And the next thing you know, radicalism is spreading like a weed throughout their mosque. And they see the change, they hear the talk, and it scares them as much as it scares us. And then the next thing you know, their imam is being replaced with somebody who is more radical. And that's how this spreads from area to area to area. And it's a really big problem. And of course, some of these radical Islamic mosques heavily supported Democrats. Some of them gave, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to Hillary Clinton, to Joe Biden, and to Obama because, they don't want us to be in charge because they know we will not put up with that radical ideology. But it's here, it's sweeping through our country. I don't know if we're equipped to stop it or not because people aren't waking up and even seeing that it's happening. If you don't understand it and you don't see that it's happening, how can you possibly stop it? But I'm telling you, it's here. It is here. We are in the threshold of being just like what's going on over in Europe. And I hope that we can get a hold of it. Again, it's not about Muslims in general. It's not about the Muslim faith. It is about these very, very ultra conservative folks coming into our country and making their way up into these political positions. That's how they do it. That's how they've done it in every other country, every single one. So don't think it's not going to happen here. Allison, he is from Iran and a radical Islamic. He's been here for 7 years and he is a socialist. Allison, thank you for saying that because, I don't think his last name is Mamdani, I believe. And I haven't really had time to read much about him or look too far into it. I had never even heard of him until he became a candidate, in that political situation in New York. And then I started reading more and I'm like, holy cow, like, what are we doing? What are we doing? People need to step back and think. And I think we're at this point where people don't want to speak out against the ideology out of fear and out of being labeled as an Islamophobist, which you're not, or a xenophobist, which you're not. It is simply trying to protect us and them. And, the Muslim people that I know who see the radicalization takes place, it scares them because you know what? These radical jihadists, what they do is they kill the Muslims first. Then they come for the rest of us. Their number one goal is to eradicate all Muslims who do not agree with their beliefs and who do not agree with their radicalization. And then once they've eliminated all of the Muslims who don't agree, and we heard these stories in the Bible, haven't we? And what's happening in some of these countries. It happened in Syria. So many people were so against Bashir al-Assad, the president of Syria. People hated him. People on this show hated Assad. And, who would comment. And I've heard it over all the years I've worked in radio or now podcasting. People would always be bashing Assad. And I would always stand up and say, you guys have no idea what you're talking about. Assad is the only thing that kept Syria from becoming an Islamic caliphate. He was the only one. He had Christian values. He supported the Christian people. He celebrated Christmas and Easter. He made sure that Syria welcomed all religions, and the people he persecuted were the people who wanted his country to become an Islamic caliphate. He persecuted the people who were burning people in cages. But now look where things have turned. Assad is gone. He had to flee to Moscow. Putin doesn't put up with that stuff over there. That is a safe place for him. The guy's from London. He went to school in London. He's not some crazy radical Islamicist. That's not who he was. But yet everybody was against him. We Americans were brainwashed and conditioned to hate that man, because that's what our government told us, that he's a bad guy. And what they don't tell us now, look, guess what? Real terrorist, the guy who is the president right now of Syria, was running around in his ISIS garb. He's not ISIS, he's actually Al Qaeda, but he was running around in his Al Qaeda garb. And now all of a sudden he put a suit on, cleaned himself up a little bit, and he's welcomed at the table to all of these G7 meetings and so on that he's been working his way into. Now, all of a sudden, he is recognized as a true leader of the country of Syria. But in fact, just a couple years ago, he was out in the streets murdering Americans. And over there, they go door to door. And if you don't agree and you don't profess your faith to Muhammad, they will kill you or worse. And don't think it can't happen here in our own country, because I'll tell you what, Islamic radicalism is here. It's not going anywhere. It's going to grow and it's going to strengthen. And you can mark my words on this. 10 years from now, we're going to be in a bad spot in this country if we don't get a grip on it right now. Right now. It's probably already too late. Look at Beaumont, Texas. Last time back in, I think it was 2012, 2013, I had a show, I think it was maybe over at 1380, somewhere like that. I talked a lot about the radical Islam that was taking place in Beaumont, Texas, and all the money they were giving to Hillary Clinton and how it was connected to Judge Scalia's death. And there was a lot of different things going on. Of course, he passed away at that Poindexter Ranch out in near Shafter, Texas. It's all very convoluted. There are ways to connect all these dots, and I did connect those dots back then. Well, guess what? This guy and his mosque started following me on social media. I would see them pop up, doing different things, and it actually scared me. And it goes to show that they do pay attention. They do pay attention. You can be the smallest little podcaster or radio show host on the planet, and if you're telling some truth about radical Islam, you are on their hit list. So we've got to be careful. These people are very, very dangerous, very dangerous. And Allison says, same thing with this mayor candidate in New York. You've got that right, Allison. And people just want to dismiss it. They say, oh, it's just temporary. They'll just, elect somebody else, or it doesn't matter. Oh my gosh, you have no idea how much it does actually matter. And again, not against Muslims, no problem with Muslims, no problem with the Islamic faith, but they are sweeping across the world, the radicalism, and it's hurting Muslims the most. So never forget that. But that takes us back to the situation in Iran, and is that these people in the Iranian regime, they are religious fanatics. Their ideology is to kill the infidel. And of course, who is the infidel? That would be Israel. That would be us. That would be their own people. Their own people are fighting awfully hard to get the regime out. And I kind of feel that's where this left off with the ceasefire, is that Donald Trump, and I do believe that this has been a plan for a long time. I don't think this is just spur of the moment that this just came together. I think this has probably been a plan since the attack in Israel and on October 7th. They probably got together and said, you know what, we've got to do something about Iran supporting all of these different proxies who are killing and attacking our people, Hamas and Hezbollah and so on. And, I don't personally, I've never really feared the country of Iran. To us, I don't think Iran's a fear to the United States, except for maybe some of these lone wolf sleeper cells, but they are a fear and they are a danger to Israel, which is how, of course, we got on board to support our ally, which is Israel. And now we're facing a situation where the plan has taken place. I think everything played out pretty much how they planned it to go. And then we swooped in. We destroyed, of course, their nuclear facilities, the ones, the three primary nuclear facilities. And it's a big debate. How destroyed were they? How quick will operations ramp back up? Do they have other secret nuclear facilities, according to CNN? Probably, because we have to remember the wording here. The wording is leak. It's not lie. The wording is leak. They leaked the information. They had a report, CNN did, that they shouldn't have had. It was a classified report from the Department of Intelligence, the DIA, Department of, am I saying that right? Yes, well, we'll figure that out later. But it was from the Department of Intelligence. And so therefore, they released this report to CNN. Somebody leaked it to CNN. CNN reported on it, and now of course it's called treasonous. So to me, if it's being called treason, if they leaked a report, then the information that was released to them very well could be true. And but the thing is does it matter anyway? Because we know Iran's going to ramp up nuclear production just as soon as they can. And let's see, Allison says New York is housing 70,000 illegal aliens. How many are Islamic extremists? I would say a third to a fourth of those people, Allison. Something along those lines wouldn't be surprising at all. Joe Adams, ask Rocky Sickman what he thinks about Islam. Well, Joe, I would love to. Get him on the show. We'd be more than happy to talk to him. I wanted to show this video really quick. Now, this is kind of funny. I played this video the other day on Facebook. Strangely enough, I didn't look yesterday, but it had over about 200,000 views on this post that I shared. It was shared, I think, over 1,000 times. So take a look at this. It's just because it's funny. We got to add a little humor in where we can. Well, if it'll play.
Been a lot of speculation as to whether Iran are trying to create a nuclear weapon. So I booked a tour at one of their uranium enrichment facilities to see what was really going on.
Here we make nuclear energy for very peaceful use only. You see? Microwave, rice cooker, washing machine, very normal things.
This is not bomb. This is giant water heater for entire village. Very efficient.
Nothing to see here. We are just cooking lentils.
Yes, only civilian. We even use uranium to toast bread now. Very modern.
On Fridays, we like to have some fun at work.
Isn't that funny? Like I said, that was shared over 1,000 times on my Facebook page and about 200,000 views, which is crazy because it's hilarious, isn't it? We sometimes have to poke fun at some of the most serious situations. So we'll see what happens. We know any ceasefire is temporary. We know they're going to start production again. The only thing that can happen is a regime change. And as I was saying, part of this plan, I'm speculating, was that once we went in and did some damage to their nuclear capabilities, then we're going to allow the Iranian people to stand up for themselves. We have the former crown prince joining in. He's very angry with Donald Trump, by the way, because he wanted them to take out the regime. And when Donald Trump didn't do that, he blocked him on TikTok, which is kind of funny. And so we'll see what plays out. I do see a regime change coming. Whether we're part of that on an underground basis, I don't know. But I do see a regime change coming because I think we all know until the regime has changed, then we're not going to see a lot of halt to that nuclear problem. But we have to be very careful when it comes to a regime change. Like Donald Trump said, he didn't want to get involved in the regime change because he doesn't want to cause chaos. And that's exactly what a regime change does, is it causes chaos. Because let's say in Iran, as an example, where you have a portion of the people who are very ultra conservative Muslims, and they're wearing their black burqas, you know who those folks are. And then you have this other group of people who are, more westernized, with more westernized values, some being Christians, some being, of course, of the Islamic faith and so on. A lot of folks on the other side who say, we don't want to be controlled by these people who want us to wear black burqas and we can't show our hair, we can't wear makeup, we can't play music, etc. So these people are going to have to battle it out in one way or the other, hopefully diplomatically, with elections. But then you have to worry, whenever you have an election, are they just going to elect somebody who's worse than the Islamic Republic? You just don't know. That's the problem here, is you really just don't know who they're going to bring in. Now, the former crown prince, I don't really think Trump wants him to be their new leader. I don't know why. I don't know the backstory. I don't know if the Iranian people want him, but I know that he is the person who's really vying for that role. And if he can work out a deal with enough people, it could potentially happen. He is hoping that it does happen. And I know, as we said on the show the other day, Israel, that very coordinated strike, precision, of course, being used to open the gate to Iranians' largest prison, right at they struck right at the gate of the prison, so that a lot of those people who oppose the government, very strategic, of course, can be released from prison and go out and hopefully get some people together to create a coup. So we'll see how all that works out. Lots of other things, though, to talk about. We'll keep talking about Iran as the situation, continues. I don't expect a lot to happen. They could end up picking things back up from where they were, but I think things will just kind of move along. I do wish, if there's anything I had to say about this situation, I do wish that something like this would have happened with Afghanistan or with Syria or with Pakistan. We haven't talked a lot about Pakistan. We will be talking about Pakistan because Pakistan is the country that is rising in terrorism the most. Afghanistan's been taken over by terrorists, Syria taken over by terrorists, Pakistan has, but they don't really talk about it that much. And they really do pose a huge threat to the world. And they do have nuclear weapons. So that's something to think about, controlled by radical Islam already. Africa, sweeping through Africa, radical Islam. It's a very scary situation, and they're completing their goals of taking over the world pretty darn quick. Ireland, all across Europe, we're seeing it. Mexico, they're in Mexico. I don't think most people realize the threat, quite honestly, that we're under. I think probably Col Joe Adams does, but I don't think most of the world understands how close we are really to have some very serious situation here in the United States. We'll see how it all plays out. Something I wanted to jump into, we've all talked about over time the rescue of children. There's hundreds of thousands of missing children in the United States, hundreds of thousands that have been taken one way or the other. Now, typically, these kids will be taken during times of chaos and crisis. As an example, there's a lot of reports. We know what's been going over in Gaza. There's allegedly 400,000 people missing from Gaza, missing, not bodies, they are missing. The majority of them are children. And we need to know, where are these kids? Where did they go? Ukraine, the first thing we started hearing out of Ukraine, as soon as there was a conflict that started taking place, children started going missing. Now, in Ukraine, they have a lot of problems there with organ harvesting and trafficking. So we know likely where those children went. In Mexico, as children are coming across, I'm not saying the Mexican people, but we know that there are people coming up from all of those Latin America, North America countries coming up through that southern corridor, and they're making their way into the United States. Somewhere in that process, there are children, hundreds of thousands of children that do go missing. There was a time, and I know people probably saying hundreds of thousands, all these hundreds of thousands means millions. And what a big number that is. But the number is probably bigger than any of us can even think. Because when you think about it, under Obama and under Biden at one point, there were over 50,000 unaccompanied minors entering into the United States sometimes every day, if you can imagine that, every day under Obama. And then sometimes, at least that per week under Biden, if not more. There's a lot of different reports out there. Those are just the people we're seeing and we can account for, unaccompanied minors. They get into the system and then they disappear. Well, we have found out, just in the past couple days, exactly how the Biden system worked. And what was happening is that kids were coming across into our country illegally. They were being rounded up by various people. Now, Donald Trump, if you recall, in his first term, he DNA tested people who were coming to pick up children. People didn't like it, but he DNA tested to make sure these kids are released to the right people. The Biden administration canceled that plan. Yesterday, well, thank you, Fred. Yesterday, we had Robert Kennedy Jr., I watched this video yesterday, talking about kids being trafficked and how these kids were picked up. The Biden administration released these children, and these children are coming from all over the world. It's not just kids. People want to say, oh, it's kids from Mexico. It's not. Most of these kids are not from Mexico. They're from all these different nations coming together. We have become the hub of child sex trafficking, believe it or not. So let's listen to what he has to say really quick.
The major reason that the Biden administration lost track of all those children is because they were emphasizing speed over security. And there were political reasons for that. They wanted to get the kids out of U.S. custody, so they were handing them off to anybody. They didn't require background checks. They didn't require identification even. I've watched horror stories of the same person picking up child after child after child, using different names and different addresses. One of the addresses was a strip club. One of the addresses was a parking lot. One of the addresses was an empty lot that was filled with shipping containers. And this character was getting all these kids. One person got 42 kids to one address. What we're doing now is DNA testing on every sponsor. We're doing personal identification. We're doing background checks, and we're doing income verification.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. My time is
Young
expired.
ladies.
I hope you guys all heard exactly what he was saying there, that we, under Donald Trump's administration, we are background checking people who come to pick up children. We are testing them for DNA to make sure that their DNA matches the DNA of these children. We are making sure that these unaccompanied children that come in, that have already entered our country, are being picked up by the right people. And, you know, we're not just taking kids like Democrats want to tell you and deporting children alone. We're not doing that. We're not just releasing them like the Biden administration did. And I will tell you what, whether you know it or see it or hear it, Donald Trump is working very hard for the children. And people ask me all the time, do you think that Donald Trump is carrying out the campaign promises that he made to us? I would like to see the Epstein files. I'm not convinced we'll ever see them. There are some things, it takes time. I get it. I'm trying to trust the process. But other things are working out exactly as we planned. And one of those, and most importantly, is the rescuing of children. So whether you see it, know it, it's happening. In my own community, just yesterday, there was an arrest. 60 children were found, missing children were found. And it's happening all across the country. I counted up in all these, there was too many stories to even tell, where these multi-agency task force are working together with local law enforcement, and they're going out, they're making arrests. Hundreds of children have been rescued just in the past 2 weeks. There were so many stories. And it was so great that I couldn't even tell you just one, because there are so many of them. They're working in your county right now. I promise you that they are, and they are going to find these children, and they're going to reunite these children with their families. And I thought about it last night, and I thought, man, you know, it's so great that they're finding these children and rescuing them away from these traffickers. Now, a lot of them are in different types of situations, but most of the cases I've seen is true trafficking, because there's always going to be Democrats who say, well, those were kids who were taken by a parent and they're perfectly fine and safe. That's not the case with these kids. These are kids who have literally been trafficked. And then you start thinking about the mental anguish that these kids and everything that they've gone through. And eventually these kids are going to be adults, and they're going to be adults with a lot of issues, a lot of turmoil going on in their lives. And then, you know, it's going to have to be a lot of ongoing, I think, mental health care and so on for these kids. And boy, it's crazy to even think. I live in a rural area, to think that somewhere near me, there were 60 kids living who are being trafficked in a rural area, not right here in my town, but in my county. And it's happening all across. So if you see something, you have to say something. And I beat myself up over it all the time. There was a day I was at a Walmart here in town, and I should have done something, and I didn't, because I kept thinking, you know, I don't think these people would be so obvious. But I was in the grocery store, and it was an older white woman who looked like she had definitely, you know, had a tough life, with a man who also, you know, looked pretty rough. And then they had these 3 little, you know, children. They were Hispanic children. And these children were completely out of control, which is how I first noticed them. And I remember being at the grocery store thinking, you know, this could easily be a traffic situation, because this particular Walmart's on a major interstate. A lot of people come through there from all over the country as they're driving from coast to coast. It's a big trafficking route. You know, I'm talking about Highway 70 is a huge, you know, trafficking route through the United States. And I remember thinking, you know, but then I thought, you know, those could be their grandkids. And, you know, there's a lot of poor people in this area because it is rural. And I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. Hopefully it was okay. But I'll never make that mistake again, because you cannot ever make the wrong move when it comes to kids and protecting kids, because you just do not know. You don't know what situation these kids are in. So keep an eye out for those reports. The FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service, your local law enforcement, all these different agencies coming together, again, carrying out these operations to release these children and get them back to their parents. I wanted to talk about that because I'll tell you, we can't talk about it enough. I'm going to talk tomorrow about Jim Caviezel and some of the things he's saying. Also, he's been very outspoken lately about trafficking children and that type of thing. So we'll talk about that also. I wanted to throw in a couple more things really quick before we go. I know we're running out of time. I want to talk a little bit about our favorite person. We haven't talked about him in quite a while. That crazy comedian, snake oil salesman called Vladimir Zelensky. Because this man, he has connived his way somehow into going to the NATO summit. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. NATO says they will never accept Zelensky and Ukraine into NATO. It will never happen. However, there he is, and he was at the G7 summit. This guy is everywhere, and he still refuses to wear a proper suit. And it's like, I am so frustrated, but I probably can't even get the words out. I'm like, why is he there? Other than them wanting to aggravate Russia, why is this guy there? And what's so interesting about that? Of course, he's there begging for money. He actually expects various countries, particularly the United States and Europe, to give him 0.25% of their annual GPD. Now, can you imagine that? My grandma, she had a term for that. I can't remember what she called it. She would call him a brazen hussy, is what she would refer to people as, a brazen hussy. And I will tell you what, Zelensky is definitely that brazen hussy, to think that he can come into a NATO meeting and demand that we give him 0.25% of our annual GDP. And this is right on the heels of Russia's Dmitry Medvedev, who came out and said, well, guess what, Americans? You don't yet know this yet, but pretty soon Donald Trump is going to be taking a really good investigation into your American Congress, because they knew exactly what they were doing when they sent over all of this money, cash, financial aid, weapons, heavy artillery, heavy weapons into Ukraine, when 30% of it ended up on the black market, and $12 billion is missing. $12 billion. Now, of course, this is Russia saying this. How much can we put into that? I think a lot of credibility. And he even inferred that it's possible that our members of Congress, that $12 million was dispersed among some of them, as well as the Ukrainian government. So we'll see how that plays out. But I want to show you this video of the snake oil salesman himself. Sooner or later.
Good evening.
Now, of course, he's there. He wants to meet Donald Trump. I've heard reports, I have no way to confirm or verify it. Unfortunately, I can't call Donald Trump up and ask him. But I heard that when they all met in Canada not too long ago, that Donald Trump asked his staff to make sure that they coordinated his schedule to stay as far away from Zelensky as he possibly could, because, of course, he knew that Zelensky wanted to corner him and ask him about money. And if you look at some of the photos that came out of NATO, the NATO summit, and you see Zelensky standing there, everybody's looking at Donald Trump, kind of talking with him, laughing at him. And then you see Zelensky all stone-faced, looking straight ahead, because he cannot stand that Donald Trump wants nothing to do with him. And of course, at this point, we have stopped all aid. That was recent too. I think it was one of those days when I was out, where we finally gave all of the aid that Democrats had already positioned for Ukraine. So we're done. Nothing more to Ukraine. They can beg all they want. Not going to happen. The only reason why this guy is still president of Ukraine is because he blocked all elections. So the people of Ukraine have absolutely no choice. As long as he says the country is in a war, then they cannot have an election. They cannot replace him. And then, of course, you ask, well, who is really running the show anyway? We all know who that is. And of course, used to be, the United States government, Biden, Obama, not real Biden, Biden's auto pen was running the country of Ukraine, because we know we put that puppet government into place. And the reason why we did that, of course, was to carry out, our own ambitions for money laundering, trafficking, organ harvesting. We all know exactly what our ambitions were for on the Democrat side over in Ukraine. And thankfully, our end of that has stopped. And Zelensky's probably not very happy. He's amassed 60 something billion dollars, since this war began. So we all know how that works. And let's see, Kathy says people better start worrying about another very progressive Muslim winning the mayoral primary yesterday in New York City. That's, Kathy, if you go back and watch the show, we actually spent a lot of time talking about that before you joined us. And I talked about exactly what a big problem that is. And we'll continue to talk about that. The last thing I wanted to throw in, because I'm running out of time, I wanted to know what you guys thought about this. They're calling it, what were they? Alligator Alcatraz, a potential prison detention center in Florida that is surrounded by an alligator moat, which of course really is just the Everglades. So let's take a look at this very quick video here.
This 30 square mile area is completely surrounded by the Everglades. Presents a efficient, low-cost opportunity to build a temporary detention facility because you don't need to invest that much in the perimeter. People get out, there's not much waiting for them other than alligators and pythons. Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Within just 30 to 60 days after we begin construction, it could be up and running and could house as many as 1,000 criminal aliens. This presents a great opportunity for the state of Florida to work with Miami-Dade and Collier counties. Alligator Alcatraz, we're ready to go.
That is not a joke. That is not a joke. That's a real facility, detention facility that was planned and approved. So we're going to see Alligator Alcatraz being built very soon again to house illegal immigrants. I know I should just call them illegals in the state of Florida. And speaking of the state of Florida, we'll talk about this more on another day, because I hope every state follows suit. And that is, of course, Governor Ron DeSantis talking once again. He's not letting this die down. He continues to bring it up. No income tax for Floridians. And he's trying to eliminate real estate tax so that when you own your home, you actually own your home. You're not paying these heavy taxes. I know, I'm sure I'm in the same boat as all of you are. When this house is paid off, it won't really matter because the majority of the payment is taxes anyway. I'm still going to be paying, what is it, $1,500, $1,600 a month. I'm not talking about a year, per month in taxes. That's how much I pay. About $1,500, $1,600 per month in taxes. It might actually be more than that because they just raised my taxes, I think, by $500 a month recently. So, if you're facing the same situation that I am, where your taxes are just absolutely outrageous, wherever state you look into homesteading tax credits. That's something I haven't had time, but I'm going to try to look into that. I've been planting fruit trees and I've got chickens and all these other things. And I think that I'm at the point now where I would qualify for those homesteading tax credits. That's my goal anyway. And hopefully your goal also if you're facing high taxes. But don't we wish that everything was a Florida? We had no income taxes and no real estate taxes. Wouldn't that be nice? Governor DeSantis is working very hard on that. Kathy says, yes, very upsetting. We'll listen to the earlier part. Yeah, Kathy, I talked about how we definitely need to be concerned about radicalism, not Muslims, radicalism taking over our country. All right, guys, that's it. I have to make a run for it. I have to work this morning. And I'm really tired because I worked really late last night and get home till midnight. But I do hope you guys all have a really good day. I've heard it's going to rain. I don't know. I haven't had time to look at the weather report. That's what someone told me. I know it's been really, really hot. Hopefully you guys aren't struggling, from the heat out there. But we'll be back tomorrow. We'll see what, goes on overnight between the Iran Israel situation. We'll talk more about sleeper cells tomorrow. I know that's a big worry everyone has. I'm not worried. I'll leave you with this. I am not as worried about Iranian sleeper cells as I am other terror groups like ISIS or Al Qaeda. Some of those folks I worry about far more than I worry about Iran, Iranian terror cells. Now, those people might act out as lone wolves, but one little tidbit of information to give you is that, our FBI keeps a lot of data on terror cells. They know approximately, that there's a lot of sleeper cells in this country. Iranians, probably about 1,500. I would say other radical jihadists, probably in the thousands, many thousands, tens of thousands, across this country. So there's far more of them than there are the Iranian sleeper cells. And, it's an ongoing threat all the time. It's not about necessarily a crisis. It's just an ongoing threat. And as we talked about last week, we have some Al Qaeda, the primary leader of Al Qaeda, speaking out, it was the week before last, saying that all of those folks who are in our country, those sleeper cells, now is the time that they need to act out and they need to start harming Americans. That was 2 weeks ago. So, is that something we're going to see? Is it something we need to worry about as another empty threat? But that little tidbit of information that that the FBI keeps track of is terror groups. And I'll tell you what, as much as I can't stand the Islamic Republic over in Iran, they are Shiites, they're Shia. And out of all the terror groups operating around our world, 99.9% of all of those terror groups are Sunni. They're Sunni. Those are the folks we really need to worry about. And the Sunni and the Shia hate each other. They kill each other every day. And so when you think about on the grand scale of terrorism, Iranian sleeper cells are like my little teeny tiny tip of my pinky finger, teeny tiny. The rest of the terror cells that are in this country, that's everybody else. That's all those groups who literally do want to kill us. So those are some things to think about. And let's see, Tammy says, Illinois doesn't have personal property tax. No, Illinois does not have personal property taxes. But I'll tell you what, they will get you with your property tax. They do have property taxes. And their real estate tax, it is absolutely unbelievably high all across Illinois. And, that's one of those kind of things you have to think about. If you live in Illinois or move to Illinois, in Missouri, they do have personal property tax. So you're taxed, on your vehicle, you're taxed, also on your home, but their rates are a lot less. But the price of real estate is a lot higher in Missouri than it is in Illinois. So in the end, it kind of averages out to be similar. Before I moved to Illinois, 2 years ago, I was really doing some research on taxes, thinking, okay, if I bought the house that I have right now where I'm at, it would be a lot of money over in Missouri. And I'm like, well, it's a really nice house for the price in the Illinois side, but then you have the taxes. But then in Missouri, of course, you have your personal property taxes. In Illinois, you don't have personal property taxes, but your real estate taxes are going to be higher. So I still feel like in Illinois, you get more house, more property for the money. And then you have to add in your real estate taxes. And in the end, you come out about the same. But the difference is you get more for the money in Illinois. So, my reasoning is that if I bought a house in Missouri, I would probably be paying the same amount every month, but my house would be a lot smaller because the price of price of real estate is just so much higher. Whereas in Illinois, bigger house, much more property for the price, but in the end, the payments would be the same Missouri or Illinois. So something to think about. And Jay says, all Illinois taxes are insanely high. You got that right, Jay. I was just thinking of you when I was talking about Illinois taxes. Well, I hope you guys all have a good day. I'm Tabitha with Tabs on Tap, and I will see you all tomorrow.